Hello and welcome back. My name is Nathan House and I'm with the Church of Christ in Houston, California. And if you could like or subscribe to this video, that would be great. I have on the screen a couple of verses to kind of get us going in our study today. First one there coming from the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 15. The Apostle Paul just kind of gives this principle about communication and what is proper communication. So Paul lays out two aspects of communication, doesn't he? He says, speaking the truth in love. And it's interesting because either one of these, void of the other, is improper communication, right? If I speak love, but I don't have truth, what good is that? If I speak truth, but don't have love, that is also no good. And so Paul puts these two things together. We as Christians need to be people who speak truth, but do so with love. And sometimes maybe sometimes we're accused of one or the other. But either way, Paul says these are things that are part of what we should speak and how we should speak. Remind you once again of the words of Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 6, verse 45. Jesus says this, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good. The evil person out of the evil treasure of his heart, evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. And here's the point I'm wanting to make as we begin. There is a way that a Christian should speak. There's a way we should and there's a way we shouldn't speak. So today what I want to do is I want to look at some Proverbs. I've done a couple of other lessons on communication based off of the book of Proverbs, and probably some of this is going to be a little bit touching on some of the same points. But I want to talk about it again because I think it's very relevant today in a world where Christians frequently are guilty of not using their mouth in a way that would be edifying. I remember at one point when I was working with the church and there was a lady from the congregation, she was asked to be more careful with her language. She was using language, and her comment was, well, why don't you give me a list of words I can't say? I spent a lot of time working on that list. I didn't do no list, but she did ask for that list. That part's not a joke. I didn't do a list though. I shouldn't have to tell you a list of words you shouldn't say, nor should anybody else have to give you a list, right? That's what maturing in the church is, right? That's what becoming someone who can discern right from wrong. There was another friend of mine who was a preacher and told the story about how they were going to appoint elders. And according to First Timothy, right, when you appoint elders, they should have a good reputation among those outside. So he just thought, I'll do my due diligence, and I'll just talk with those in the community who know this person, expecting to find nothing because everybody in the church loved this person so much. But shockingly, when he went to meet with those people that worked for this individual, they were shocked this person even went to church. They talked about how his mouth, the words he used, how he spoke was so inappropriate. Again, they were shocked that he called himself a Christian. We shouldn't be using our mouth in such a way that it contradicts our claim of being a child of God. The book studies. This one's kind of interesting to me. Did a little investigating on this, and this is probably a hard study to actually do. But according to one of the things I read, it said 60% approximately of the U.S. claim to be followers of Christ. That may shock you. It's shocked to me. It's relatively recent information. Approximately 60% claim to be followers of Christ. But look at the next statistic and kind of see them together. 8% of U.S. adults report that they do not use swear words. So 60% of the people in the U.S. claim to be followers of Christ. Only 8% of people in the U.S. say they don't use swear words. Something's off. Something's off. Estimates are that over 50% of self-identifying Christians use swear words to some degree. Now, I'd be shocked if all of us, we're perfect, never ever do this, never made that mistake even when we were younger or in a bad. I'm not, whatever. I'm not trying to diminish it, nor am I trying to act like we're perfect. But that we would call ourselves Christians and use language, it's not right, right? It's inappropriate. And so today I want to talk about having the mouth of a Christian. What does that look like? Having the mouth of a child of God. And it's more than just swearing, by the way. The scriptures obviously reveal there's various types of communication that we shouldn't do. And there's a list on the screen. You can look at that. But the mouth of a Christian is more than what we don't say, it's also what we say. So we're going to talk about both aspects of this today. My youngest son, Dyson, he was telling me the other day he was working and stopped by a place and got a hamburger, and he just happened to be started talking with the guy who was there at the hamburger place. And Dyson told me, Dad, the guy was just such an encouraging person, kind. When he found out my son was going to Oklahoma Christian, he started talking. I'm going to pray for you. He was really excited for my son, and just my son left saying, Dad, and we've used this word because the Apostle Paul uses it in Philemon and another time or two somewhere else as well. I think in Timothy, being refreshers, right? People that leave others refreshed. Man, I don't want to be a person that when someone leaves my presence, they're like, dude, that guy's exhausting. He wears me down. I would much rather be a person, and I'm sure you would too, that when someone leaves our presence, they feel built up, encouraged, refreshed. And so that's also part of being a child of God and having our mouth used for God. So let's begin with, first of all, Proverbs, some basic general advice here. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. So kind of a general piece of advice regarding communication. And the idea kind of is this, you don't have to talk. You don't have to talk all the time, right? Be a person who listens. Restrain your lips some. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with talking, and maybe you're a chatty person, and I'm not trying to shame anybody for that. But Solomon says there's wisdom in restraining our words. Being a person who listens. I think one of a problem in our current communication that we struggle with, and I know I struggle with this at times too, is talking on top of people or anticipate what they're going to say, and so I quit listening to them, or anything along this line, or sometimes just honestly being lazy as a listener. But my point here, according to Solomon, right? When words are many, transgression isn't lacking. So let's restrain our lips. He kind of feeds off of that same point here in Proverbs 17. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge. Even a fool. And so even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. So there's some general advice there, just being cautious, right? Be a person who listens. Don't be a person that has to talk all the time. Restrain your lips at times. And people might think you wiser for doing so. I should probably heed that advice for sure. Proverbs, Solomon also talks about some things we should avoid. I'm not going to give you a whole list. You can read through Solomon's writings and other places as well, right? But here at Proverbs 15, verse 1, Solomon does something in this verse that he does in a lot of verses, right? He actually sets contrasts here. And I have it as avoid, but also you could say things to do. On this verse, there's something to avoid, but also something to do, right? So a soft answer turns away wrath. So you could say that's something we need to focus on, right? Being people that have soft answers. You ever had someone come up to you and they're hot from the very beginning, they're mad from the very beginning, and so easy just to be sucked into that and to respond in the same way. But Solomon reminds us, a soft answer turns away wrath. But so here's the contrast. But a harsh word stirs up anger. So avoid harsh words. Avoid using your mouth in a way that is harsh or unkind. Here's another one. Lying lips. Obviously, we're not going to be people that lie. We shouldn't be people that lie. We should be honest. Here's one that I find interesting. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. How many times have we heard others say, I unloaded on him. I gave him 2 barrels. I've had enough of them. So I gave full vent to my anger. I gave full vent. I spoke my mouth, we brag about at times unloading on people. I would call that giving full vent. And Solomon says that's what a fool does. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man, here again, contrast, right? A wise man quietly holds it back. Proverbs 11:13, whoever goes about slandering, here's another thing on our list of things Solomon says we shouldn't do, reveals secrets. But here again, here's the contrast, right? Things we should do. But he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps the thing covered. And people come up to me and ask me, well, what is gossip? What is slander? And well, people sometimes say, well, if it's truth, it's not gossip and all this sort of stuff. Look, I don't want to get into haggling over definitions, I don't guess, but I thought this quote was powerful. And I think it was relevant. Speech can be sinful even when every word is true. And I couldn't find who actually said that. I didn't come up with it, but I liked it. When I came across it, I'm like, I'm going to use that. Speech can be sinful, even when every word is true, because it's spoken to hurt, it's spoken to damage, it's spoken to tear down, and that shouldn't be what a Christian does. He then moves on to, or we're going to move on to some things we should do to build up. And honestly, if you look at the verses I just presented, the contrast of those are building up types of things, right? Soft words, restraining our lips. But here's another one. Proverbs chapter 12. Ooh, I'm actually back out of that for a second. When you look at what Jesus Christ does in the Gospels, he encounters people whose lives are often not going in the right direction. There's hardships, there's struggles, and he heals them. Spiritually, physically, he heals them. You open the book of Genesis, right? And we read about the tree of life, right? God places this tree of life in the garden, something that gives life to those who eat of it. And it's interesting because Solomon kind of uses both of these ideas, right? And he ties them to our tongue, to our mouth, to what we say. Proverbs 12, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but, so here again, contrast, right? But the tongue of the wise brings healing. Does our tongue bring healing to those in need? Jesus brought healing. Physically, spiritually, he brought healing. Proverbs 15:4, a gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in the tongue breaks the spirit. A gentle tongue is a tree of life. It's life-giving. As my son said, as I shared a moment ago, something that refreshes others, leaves others encouraged. The Apostle Paul also had a lot to say about communication. I kind of already introduced Ephesians 4:15 earlier, speaking the truth in love. Here's another principle that he puts together in that same book, same chapter. Later on in verse 29, he says, let no corrupting. And this word here, corrupting, I think I spelled it wrong. I think it's S-A-R-P-O, sarpos, not sapros, I think. They'll check me on that. It's something that is rotten. It's something that has no value. It's something that is diseased. Think of a piece of fruit, right? Who doesn't like a good strawberry, man? A good strawberry is hard to beat. You ever bitten into one and on the inside it was brown? That's one of the grossest things in the world. Let nothing rotten, no rotten talk come out of your mouth. No diseased talk come out of your mouth. But only such as is good for building up. But only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. We need to be people that speak in such a way that we heal others, that we're a tree of life, that we build up. He'll say again a few verses later in Ephesians 5, so that was Ephesians 4, this is Ephesians 5. He says, but sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, right? So go back to this verse. I want you to notice this. There are some things that fits the occasion, right? It fits the occasion. It's the right thing to do, right thing to say at the right time. Look at what else he says. Some of these things shouldn't even be named among you, as is proper among the saints. So you see there are some things that are proper and improper, things that shouldn't be named among you, but some that, right, those things are not proper among the saints. Look at, he says, again here in verse 4, he says, these things are out of place. They're out of place for a child of God. So what are these things that are out of place that shouldn't be named? He says, no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, but instead let there be thanksgiving. I've actually heard about Christians teaching that it's okay to use cuss words. It's okay to do this because they're just words anyways. The Apostle Paul doesn't view it that way. Filthy talk, this could also be translated as obscenities, right? It shouldn't come out of your mouth. They should not be named among you. They're not proper. They're out of place for a child of God. Look at Colossians 3, the Apostle Paul once again. But now you must put them away. We have this list, and I think all of these are probably ultimately tied to the tongue in this context, right? Anger, how do we express that in our speech? Wrath, how do we express that? Malice. Now, perhaps these are not, but I kind of tie them all together as a list of things that we do with our mouth. That's how I view this. Slander and, watch this one, obscene talk. Put them away. Obscene talk. This word means dirty talk. The Holman Christian Standard Bible translates it as filthy language. Obscene talk, dirty talk, filthy language. put them away. Here's another thing we do with our tongue. Again, going back to what we saw earlier in Proverbs, don't lie. Why? Because I've put off that old person. These things are out of place. These things shouldn't be named among saints. It's not proper for God's children. Proper speech. Look at this one. Colossians. So that one was Colossians 3. So the very next verse, chapter, Colossians 4. Paul says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of your time. Now, interestingly, he immediately, after talking about how we walk amongst outsiders, he immediately brings up the things we say, right? Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer each person. Let's be people that are aware of our speech. Let's be people that are aware that we can do good or do harm, that we can build up or tear down. And let's ask questions. Let's ask questions. Am I being helpful? Am I being truthful? Right? Speaking the truth in love. Am I being truthful? Is my speech helpful? Is it building up? Is it refreshing? Am I being mean? Sarcasm. We're very sarcastic people, right? We think it's funny, and maybe it is at times, but if sarcasm is hurting, then we should be careful with our sarcasm. Mean speech, embarrassing others. Am I doing these things? Does it build up? Does it encourage the things I'm saying? Is what I'm saying appropriate to time and situation? One last verse. I'm going to leave Paul and I'm going to leave Proverbs and throw one on the screen from the book of James, chapter 3, verse 5 here. And you can see these fire blazing this forest here. In words, look at what James says. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. And so the last part of this verse, Robert Plummer, who does the Daily Dose of Greek. If you like to do Greek stuff, you can find his stuff on YouTube. Daily Dose of Greek. In his discussion of James 3:5, he said this. I thought it was interesting. He says, how great. He says this is kind of a question, really. And it's really more, I think, this is my understanding of how he was presenting this. The question is more like this. How great a forest can be, how great a forest. So like how large of a forest can be set by even the smallest of fire, right? So it's a question almost like that he's asking here in James. Is there a forest that is, that little tiny flame was really small. It couldn't light on fire a huge forest because the flame was too small. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how massive the forest is. Even the smallest flame can burn it down. We can have this massive, beautiful forest, and it could be the biggest forest on planet Earth. But the smallest of flame can burn it down. So James is reminding us of the danger of the damage that words can do, that our tongue can do. Let's be people who use our tongue, who use our mouth to refresh, to encourage, to build up. Let's watch the words we use and make sure that we're not misrepresenting Christianity, that we're not using filthy speech, that when we leave people, they glorify God and are thankful for having the opportunity to have spoken with somebody who left them encouraged and built up. You guys have a good day, and let's go use our mouth for Christ. God bless.